So let me now take the box and remove the first sleeved title, which is right here, and I'll put it here. And this is the film, which is from the year 1984. And this is a film which, again, is directed by Lars von Trier and screenplay by Lars von Trier and Niels Verso. And among its really very fascinating cast, we have people like Michael Elphick and Esmond Knight and Mimi Lai and others. And it is this film, once again from 1984. This is Lars von Trier's The Element of Crime. So I think if we were to try to focus on some, say, general comments about The Element of Crime, I think we can focus on the fact that this is a film that is a type of, say, crime or murder mystery story that is also dealing with elements of, say, tracing maybe detective elements through its storyline. We have a sort of detective or detective figure at the central sort of proceedings of this, portrayed by Michael Elphick, and trying to trace through certain clues or keys to a mystery involving certain killings. And this forms, I think, the backbone for, I think, a sort of plot structure of the film. Now, that is, however, not the end of the story, because when we are first engaging with this film, The Element of Crime, I think we can see quite immediately how visually striking it is in terms of its, say, color palette, in terms of the way it seems to treat sort of sepia or monotone or monochromatic color schemes in a way that is either very subtle or very direct, in a way that's meant to suggest a type of, say, place or environmental context on the one hand, but also a sense of displacement and also a sense of confusion as to place and time and contours on the other. So in other words, this is a film, that seems to have a very concrete identity as to where it's taking place, a kind of semblance or conception or idea of a place in Europe, or that those contours or those alignments. However, it is also a very highly constructed place. It's a place that feels very much almost in a fantastic type of realm, an almost purposefully fictionalized construct of the realities of the situation. So this is my way to say that it is a highly stylized version of this mystery detective thriller type of genre film. And in that way, too, we have ways in which characters interact with each other, and time jumps interact with each other, and scenes intercut with each other, and indeed plots within plots overlap within each other, and indeed not just overlap, but perhaps converge in a type of cinematic contour, a la Lars von Trier's cinematic stylings. That we have an interesting way that this film, on the one hand, operates with a type of a linear plot drive, or maybe there is an urgency to the way this film seems, on the one hand, to operate in some contour form or another, a type of linear plot drive forward. Again, this idea of a mystery thriller and trying to solve the mystery and the past and identity structures. But already within that, we have the way in which the film seems to go back and forth in terms of a playful or maybe even deceptive use of chronology, poetically deceptive use of chronology, and also the way in which identity seems to be forged, constructed, and destroyed perhaps before our very eyes, such that we are left pondering and wondering who exactly are, quote-unquote, our heroes and who exactly are, quote-unquote, our villains. And I use air quotes here because I think we can see, too, that the display and the sort of character engagement and involvement that we as viewers seem to be a part of the journey when you watch this film allows for, I think, a lot of ambiguity in the readings of this, as well as giving us a lot of visual and sonic enticement. There is a sense in which this film engages and presents, but also withholds and lays bare a sense of presence, but also mystery. There is a sense of violence, but also a sense of intimacy. There is a sense of an urgent aggression, but also a sense of timid passiveness. And there's a feeling or key or atmospheric tone, if you will, of, again, a type of contextual place, but also feeling out of place. And I think that type of maybe subtle and very subtle but also distinct application of cinema, I think, is one of the great strengths of the works of Lars von Trier, is it not? Because we have a playful and very overtly and wonderfully stylized look and feel and aesthetic. I think give the film the sense of a browns and golden hues and sepia tone-like quality, which gives a sense of maybe an homage in the past, which is also very important and key to the plot itself when we think about how the past and past structures tend to either mimic or deceive the proceedings of the plot and the solving of the mysteries, as it were, on the one hand. So the past is very important, and the visual styles, I think, link to that very well. But at the same time, we have the way in which certain devices or maybe grammatical symbols are used in a way that almost confuse the proceedings. And so we are maybe thinking about something that is maybe of the future, but also of the past. We are thinking about something that is very exterior, but also very internalized. We are thinking about or watching something that is very much outwardly genre specific in terms of the murder mystery genre. So it's outwardly genre specific in terms of those cinematic clues. Also, it has the potential for being a very inward, introspective film that is about psychological portraits of the characters that we see. And when we get further and further into the details, we realize that indeed there is much, much more to the psychological profiles of the characters, at least potentially so, than we might have first realized when we first started the film. So, and also we have the way in which this film, maybe in that context, has a type of almost winking at the audience type of aesthetic appeal to it, because it seems to be very ultra serious on the one hand, but also it seems also at the same time, perhaps in the same fleeting moments, it's taking itself seriously, but also not taking itself seriously at the same time. And this, I think, all points to a sense of the wonderful dynamism and almost confusing swirl, if you will, of an approach to the aesthetic of Lars von Trier's work overall that we'll see going forward for those who might be on, say, a Lars von Trier cinematic journey. If you start with The Element of Crime, I would suggest that you can see so many parts or indeed elements of this film that might find its echo or might find its parallel in later points of the Lars von Trier cinema journey, including, I dare say, other films that can be found in the Europe trilogy set. So these and other reasons, I think, make for very enticing viewing indeed. It also has a potential for being a sort of broad historical contextual film, and the way in which characters reckon with the past, the way in which characters reckon with a sense of trauma or tragedy. And that trauma or tragedy is at once both very broad and very societal wide. In other words, it's a type of trauma or tragedy that touches upon many people writ large in terms of a group or societal basis on the one hand, but also it's a trauma that touches and affects people individually, personally, and deeply. So this type of reckoning with a historical traumatic past, I think, finds its parallel to, which I think will be echoed even further as we get through some of these other films in the Europe trilogy set. We can see how this film, The Element of Crime, is indeed, I think, among other things, operating on the potential interpretive basis of seeing how characters, or seeing how a type of consciousness, if you will, as expressed or through one way of expression, that being the cinema of the 1980s, how this type of consciousness of the past affects one in the present. And we find examples of that, as I dare say, in the stories of the characters that we see here in The Element of Crime. So this is my very bloated way of saying that this is a film that I think has so much in terms of its visual flair, and also its, say, rugged sense of adhering to a type of homage of a type of or spirit of the storytelling that it's premised upon, that of the mystery thriller, a psychological thriller of sorts, but also has a almost subversive, winking at the eye type of aesthetic appeal that indicates the very purposely applied contradictions that are embedded with throughout in a way that make it very fascinating, very confusing, and very, I think, enthralling watch I could say too, for me, when I first saw the film many years ago, it was a film that was very difficult for me to engage with because I found myself caught off balance a lot, because you sometimes have constructed dialogue scenes of characters. One character says one thing, and then you have a character that seems to be going on a different track altogether. So there doesn't seem to be any type of unifying factor, even in terms of certain dialogue scenes and certain juxtapositions within scenes itself and between characters. Has a sense of almost an abruptness to it. But that abruptness, I understand, adds a sense of flair and effect and style. And I dare say, too, that that abruptness gives a sense of this lack of equilibrium or lack of balance, which I think is part of the effect of the film. And when we feel a lack of balance when you watch it, it does give us a sense of urgency, a sense of wanting to know more, wanting to go to the finish line, as it were, get at the heart of the mystery. And I think that then, in its very intriguing way, adds to the engagement level, wanting to engage further with this. So that's my way that was my way of watching this film over and over when I was watching this when I first saw it many years ago, and then now upon 2023, the occasion of this release. So it's a fascinating film all around. It has certain disturbing qualities, and some of the questions that it poses, as well as some of the proposed answers that it gives to those proposed questions, I think also lead to some pretty potentially disturbing areas of thought and consideration indeed. But again, that's part of the landscape of this type of storytelling, and the storytelling is given a sense of urgency and verve and style that is very, very memorable indeed. So this is the film from 1984, which is The Element of Crime. So the Criterion Collection has released this set of films, Lars von Trier's Europe trilogy. Again, it's spy number 1. Let's try it again. The Criterion Collection has released this film, or these sets of films, or this collection of films, which is Lars von Trier's Europe trilogy. And the films, again, are The Element of Crime and Epidemic and Europa. And the set is given the spy number 1168. And it says The Element of Crime, 4K digital restoration of Europa and 3K digital restorations of The Element of Crime and Epidemic, all approved by director Lars von Trier, with uncompressed stereo or monaural soundtracks, and a number of supplements as well, which we will talk about momentarily. But just please note that, as I mentioned before, there are 3 separate films. This is the Blu-ray set, and it's in this Digipack casing, so it's this cardboard casing, and each of the films is in its own separate sleeve. So I've already spoken about each of the films, and I've taken the sleeves out, but just to let you know that they are included like this. And when you open them up, they're not these plastic cases, but they adhere to the Digipack casing. So it's this flip type of thing, cardboard casing here. So that's The Element of Crime and Europa. And then, Epidemic, and then Europa right here. And then there's also a booklet, which is a staple booklet. It's not thick enough to merit its own separate place in the box itself, but rather it sits in the casing. It sits in the casing of The Element of Crime. So The Element of Crime has it's robust enough, or it's thick enough, so that it can rest within the Element of Crime sleeve itself. So when you open the Element of Crime sleeve, that gives way for room for the staple booklet. And so we'll talk about the context of the staple booklet a little bit later in this video. But this is a Blu-ray set, so each of the films is found on its own separate disc, Blu-ray disc. There are 3 discs overall, and so included on each disc is the film itself and separate supplements that are part of that presentation or that film, or that could be said to be linked to the film. So let us now talk about the supplements that can be found on each of these discs itself. First up, we have the supplements that can be found included with the disc of The Element of Crime. And first up, we have 2 commentary tracks. The first commentary track, they're both from the year 2005, And the first commentary track is with Lars von Trier and Thomas Giselsen, who is the editor, and Tom Elling, who is the cinematographer. And this is in the Danish language, and it's also subtitled. So you have the option. I don't understand the Danish language, unfortunately, so I should say, too, that my pronunciation of many aspects and names is going to be mistaken throughout, so I apologize very profusely for that. I hope you can forgive me. But I do not understand the Danish language, so you have the option of listening to the commentary track as you're watching the film, and then the option also is further supplemented by the subtitling that you can find. So that's the commentary track that's subtitled as you watch the film. And so what we have here is a very interesting commentary track. I would say that it has a type of lively feel to it because they do know each other. There's also kind of a friendly, casual air to it. There's a lot of giggling and a lot of laughing along the way. I would say once in a while there might be comments that one can say might not necessarily be the most appropriate way of wording it, shall we say. So there might be some moments where certain elements or people or points are discussed that might not be for everyone. But there's also, Lars von Trier in particular. He has a type of public persona, and I think maybe is not necessarily for all, let me put it that way. And so while the commentary track is not wholly like that, there are moments here and there when one might not necessarily be totally in line with certain jokes or certain ways of describing things. So just a little heads up on that. But I wouldn't say that the whole commentary track is like that. And in fact, it's very few and far between that those seeming perhaps off-color elements might appear. But for me, it didn't bother me that much at all because one can understand the context of the discussion, and also one can also focus on other aspects of the commentary track, which is they speak about comments of the cinematography choices. There's a monochrome aspect of it. It's one of the memorable aspects of this film. Certain casting choices, in particular Esmond Knight and his situation. He has a very prominent and critical role in how his, say, condition needed to be considered when considering certain aspects of blocking or pacing or camera movement, etc. As well as Michael Elphick. There's discussion about how Michael Elphick, his performance, as to also how Michael Elphick felt about the film during and also post-production, which are an interesting set of almost a mythology that's surrounding the making of this film as well as the film itself. And also the way in which this film has this type of quote-unquote Europe feel to it, in the sense of harkening back to elements of the place, but also a type of literary quality to it as well. Dante is referred to, and the like, as well as mirrors and reflections and glass and the camera placement and the like. And I do, let me go back also to the casual nature of this. I think there is an almost joking spirit of it. And that joking spirit, I think, shows that, I mean, the commentary participants like to poke fun at each other. There's one point where someone says to Lars, why do you come up with such stupid things, Lars? Ha ha ha. So that type of joking element or spirit is on display here in this commentary track. So I think overall very fascinating. And definitely worthwhile, especially if you really are into this film. So The Element of Crime, that's the first commentary track from 2005. The second commentary track is also from 2005, and this one then features Peter Schepelern and Stig Björkman. And we have, I think, another way in which one can view this film in terms of the literary kind of qualities or points of the film, such as how Kafka is perhaps quoted or used or applied, and others, and sort of the European literary tradition as embodied in a film like The Element of Crime, and the idea too of other filmmakers, other talents, other voices that are referenced to, and von Trier has been on record of mentioning, for instance, people like Dreyer as well, also Tarkovsky as well. So, and Hitchcock as well, and others. So, I think this type of literary or cinematic tradition also finds its way through the film, reviewing this film, and I think those points are addressed here in this commentary track, which I really enjoyed, by the way. There's also Orson Welles is also comes to mind, Touch of Evil, etc. So, and also there's an emphasis on how the filmmakers are trying to really give a sense of uniqueness to the film's look and quality. And I think if that was the mission statement, I think they've accomplished that mission statement many times over, because it does have a really distinct look and quality and feel to it. That's, I think, further embellished by the real great, and I mean this again very positively, the real great way this film is so weird. It has this weird, just off the wall sense of what's going on. It's just, I love that unexpected nature of it, and it feels very much a part of that unique quality is given voice very well cinematically, as well as certain ways this film might be said to be quote-unquote politically correct or politically incorrect, the way in which it treats or handles, say, male characterizations, female characterizations, and also relationships between and among, as well as ways in which, say, other aspects of, say, societal questions or societal issues might be embedded and handled in a way that could be said to be maybe off-putting to some, but again, the story and the story elements are, I think, very many, and in the plural. So there are many levels of this film going on as well. And plus, I think that adds to the way in which this film has a sense of engagement and also antagonism, which I think is part of the point of a film like The Element of Crime, and indeed, too, I dare say, other films in the Lars von Trier canon. So I think for those and other points, you have this great commentary track as well. Both the commentary tracks are from 2005, so but they're definitely worth checking out if you can, especially if you're interested in the works of von Trier and also The Element of Crime. So there's those two commentary tracks. And then going into the supplements themselves, we have the first supplement. It's called Transformer, a portrait of Lars von Trier, and this is described as being from the year 1997. Approximately 53 minutes, and with Björkman interviewing von Trier as being the main component of this, also in the context of discussing Lars von Trier's work up to the time of the making of this. And at the time of the making of this this documentary was the filming of the von Trier work Breaking the Waves. So there are some scenes and discussions about breaking the waves and casting choices about breaking the waves. So it's very much but it's also dealing with the filmography and aesthetic of von Trier, and also his history, and included in which is, of course, The Element of Crime and other works in the Europe trilogy. So in that way, it's a very good primer and introduction. I think relatively speaking, it's an introduction that has a nice ease of entry. So this is one place to go if you're looking into more information about von Trier's work, especially the early part of his career. So this is Transformer, a portrait of Lars von Trier, approximately 53 minutes. And then next up we have Storyboarding, The Element of Crime, this is from 2005, approximately 11 minutes. And this is focusing on Tom Elling's work and cinematography work, and also the background in terms of film school and painting and meeting and working with von Trier, and also focusing in on the capturing of the visual elements and how those are translated to the photographic stylings of the film. So again, the visual aesthetic is one of the great strengths, the key points of this one. It's true for any film, of course, it goes without saying, but there's something very much part of it's almost like the visual look is linked directly to the psychological underpinnings of the characters or the filmmakers. And so the way in which images are captured and rendered and created and then translated to the screen via the cinematography, this is very important. So you get a great sense of this in this supplement here. So this is approximately 11 minutes. And then the next supplement we have Innenstadt Europa, The Making of the Element of Crime. And this is a 1984 documentary. It's approximately 30 minutes. And here we have other aspects of it. We have other people that are featured and mentioned, Per Holst or Michael Elphick, as well as von Trier and others. And we have more underpinnings and more behind the scenes ideas and explorations about what the film is. I like this too because, among other things, it discusses this idea of the detective or genre film element, or the homage to the detective thriller, which is very much what the element of crime is. I mean, among other things, among the many ways one can describe the element of crime, it is a detective thriller. It is a mystery thriller, and it has that almost neo-noir hard-boiled edge to it, which I think serves the film very well. And I like how those elements, as well as other elements, are discussed here. So this is another making of documentary from 1984. But it's definitely well worth it. Approximately 30 minutes. And that's not all, because then we have anecdotes from Element of Crime. This is from 2005, approximately 19 minutes. And we have, again, more comments from Chaperon, as well as Holsten, Gislason, and others, talking about reminiscence and looking back on the element of crime, how it figured into the works of von Trier, and the idea too of crime films in the context of the film in the context of Danish cinema, European cinema of 1980s. And then more ideas that we see how the film, again, seems to blur the line, capturing many genres at once, many sensibilities at once, etc. So well worth checking out. I like these various points of consideration of this film as shown in the anecdotes as well as others. So please check this out if you can. This is 19 minutes. And then that's not all, because then we have two short films as well that round out the supplements here. First, we have Nocturne from 1980, approximately 8 minutes. And then Images of Liberation, approximately 51 minutes, from 1982. Short films, Lars von Trier short films. So this is really fascinating. I think Nocturne, I think, has this, again, off-kilter, wonderful, purposefully applied lack of equilibrium that could be said to be very much hand in hand with the way in which the jarring nature of the element of crime, I think, succeeds so magnificently. We have it on display in a work like Nocturne so very well, open to a number of potential interpretations. That's one thing. And then the other thing, too, which is the other film, Images of Liberation, is so great because it has, again, that similar type of aesthetic quality to it, while also giving us an injection of history, and specifically the history of the war or post-war, or a sense of Europe and the effects, both immediate and distant. Immediate in the sense of the time and the place of the film itself, and distant in the sense of when the film is being made. I think that is also in itself a very great way in which the von Trier cinema is operating, as well as a way in which that film, as well as the Nocturne film, go hand in hand in terms of a nice double bill, or triple bill, as it were, with a film like The Element of Crime. So it's great to have these films included as well. So Images of Liberation, and then the earlier film Nocturne, also included as part of the disc for The Element of Crime.